The night his mother asked me to sign a prenuptial agreement in front of his entire family so I would never touch their inheritance, I realized I was not marrying into love. I was being evaluated like a financial threat. For 5 months, he had been quietly draining my account, then calling me unstable whenever I questioned the charges. They thought the prenup would protect their legacy for me. They did not know I had already traced every transaction, every margin loan, every hidden balance. My name is Lillian Harper, and the night they tried to publicly diminish me was the night their family balance sheet began to collapse. Chapter 1. The woman they thought couldn't afford the ring. When my fiancé's mother told me I needed to sign a prenuptial agreement to protect their family's assets, she believed I made $50,000 a year. She was wrong by more than $130,000. My name is Lillian Harper. I am 38 years old, and in 2024, I work as a senior financial risk manager at Blue Ridge Indemnity Group in Charlotte, North Carolina. Last year, my compensation was just over $192,000 before bonus. I build models that predict loss before it happens. I am paid to see collapse coming. The Mitchell family thought I was a modest, mid-level professional with limited upside. That misunderstanding did not happen by accident. About a year ago, during brunch in Myers Park, Caroline Mitchell asked me what I made. She swirled her mimosa like it was casual conversation. "Roughly, what are you earning these days, Lillian?" I smiled and said mid-50s. It was not a lie. 8 years ago, that was true. I never corrected it. Andrew repeated it later to his mother as if it were current. No one asked again. The Mitchells live in Ballantyne in a brick house with white columns and a 3-car garage. The lawn is edged so sharply it looks artificial. Their kitchen has marble counters that gleam under recessed lighting. Everything about that house says stability. But I have spent 14 years studying balance sheets. Stability leaves footprints. So does strain. Andrew is 40. He works in commercial real estate. In 2021, he closed a major office redevelopment deal and earned well over $100,000. In 2022 and 2023, when the office market contracted and remote work hollowed out downtown leases, his commissions shrank. He told me that was temporary. His mother, Caroline, runs Mitchell Interior Concepts, a staging business that once thrived in the luxury market. Since 2021, revenue has dipped each year. The parties continued, the charity auctions, the curated wine pairings. But there were moments when I noticed small cracks. A conversation cut short when I entered the room. A bank envelope left face down on the counter. In early March 2024, Andrew began talking about merging our finances after the wedding. "We are a team," he said one evening in South End as traffic hummed outside the restaurant windows. "There is no reason to keep separate accounts once we are married." I took a slow sip of wine. "What does merging mean to you?" He shrugged. "Everything in one place. Income, expenses, investments. No need to track who earns more." The phrasing stayed with me. No need to track who earns more. I said I prefer transparency with structure. Clear boundaries prevent misunderstandings. He laughed softly. "You always overthink things, Lillian. You do not have to run our marriage like one of your risk models." Overthink. In my world, the people who accuse you of overthinking are often the ones who benefit from you not thinking at all. In 2017, my aunt lost her home after her husband quietly opened a joint line of credit and drained it. She trusted him. She signed paperwork she did not read carefully. When the foreclosure notice arrived, she said she never saw it coming. I did. That was the year I opened a separate account, not because I distrusted love, because I understood leverage. By late April 2024, Andrew was pressing harder. "Once we are married," he said in our townhouse in Noda, "you will not need your own account like that. It feels defensive." Defensive. The word landed heavier than overthink. A week later, we drove to his parents' house in Ballantyne for dinner. The table was set with monogrammed napkins. Paige, his sister, was scrolling through her phone talking about an influencer event she was planning. Caroline poured wine and asked about our venue deposit. After dessert, Caroline placed her glass down with deliberate calm. "We've been discussing something important," she said. "Given the family assets and long-term interests, we believe it is wise to have a prenuptial agreement in place, just to protect what belongs to the Mitchell family." The room quieted. Andrew did not look at me. Paige tilted her head, studying my face, as if waiting for embarrassment. In that moment, I understood two things clearly. First, they believed I was the financial risk. Second, they assumed I would be grateful enough to comply. "Of course," I said evenly. "I believe in contracts. I will have my attorney review it, and we'll need full financial disclosure from both sides before anything is signed." Caroline blinked once. "Well, naturally," she replied. Andrew finally looked up. There was something new in his expression. Not anger, not surprise. Calculation. We drove home in silence. The skyline of Charlotte glowed faintly against the dark. When we pulled into the driveway, Andrew reached for my hand. "It's just a formality," he said. "My mother worries about protecting what she built." I nodded slowly. Then we should protect everything honestly. Upstairs, I took off my engagement ring and set it on my dresser. It caught the lamplight and flashed back at me. Formality is a word people use when they don't want you to examine details. The next morning, I logged into my personal banking dashboard before work. I hadn't planned to audit anything, but the conversation shifted my internal model. A transaction from a resort in Asheville stood out. $1,200 charged 3 weeks earlier. I had been in Raleigh that weekend for a conference. I scrolled further back. Several smaller charges appeared. $290, $185, $312, all within the past 5 months, all under the automatic fraud alert threshold. My pulse slowed instead of racing. That's how I know I'm in analyst mode. 29 transactions, $7,460 total. I opened a spreadsheet, date, amount, merchant, location, notes. I did not confront Andrew that morning. I went to work. I presented a capital allocation analysis to the executive team. I answered questions about exposure curves and catastrophe reserves. But every break between meetings, I returned to the spreadsheet. By afternoon, I knew something else. If a prenuptial was coming, disclosure would be mandatory. Assets and liabilities, income and debt, margin loans, credit balances, business interests. If they believed they were protecting themselves from me, they were about to expose far more than they anticipated. That evening, Andrew texted me. "Mom wants to send the draft tomorrow. It's straightforward." Straightforward. I thought about the resort charge, about the push to merge accounts, about Caroline's voice carry quiet authority across that dining table. In risk modeling, there is a moment when scattered anomalies align into a pattern. You can't unsee it once it forms. If a contract was coming, I intended to read every line. And if they wanted disclosure, I was prepared to give them exactly that. Chapter 2. The draft they didn't expect me to read. The prenup was not written to protect me. It was written to expose them. It arrived in my inbox at 3:17 on a Tuesday afternoon, forwarded from Andrew with a single sentence. "Mom wanted to send this over. It is straightforward." Nothing about 43 pages of legal language is ever straightforward. I downloaded the document at my desk at Blue Ridge Indemnity, but waited until I was home in Noda to open it. Paper forces you to slow down. It reveals intention between the lines. The first pages were polite. Shared future, mutual respect, protection of pre-existing family assets. Then the operative language began. Section 7.2 required full and complete disclosure of all assets and liabilities prior to execution. Section 9.1 stated that failure to disclose material financial information could render the agreement unenforceable. Unenforceable. In my world, that word is leverage. I texted Andrew. "I see references to disclosure schedules. When will those be attached?" He replied a few minutes later. That is standard boilerplate. We can fill it in later. Later is where numbers disappear. I called an attorney the next morning. Her name was Dana Mercer, 56 years old, 25 years practicing family law in North Carolina. Her office overlooks Fayetteville Street in Raleigh, and she had the calm expression of someone who has watched many people confuse love with protection. I handed her the draft. "You are not offended by this," she said after skimming. "You are analyzing it." "Yes." She nodded. A prenuptial agreement in North Carolina requires voluntary execution and fair disclosure. If disclosure is incomplete, enforceability becomes vulnerable. Independent counsel strengthens that position. "So, if they want protection," I said, "then they must be transparent." "Correct, and so must you." That part did not concern me. When I told Andrew I had retained my own attorney, he went silent for a few seconds. "You think my family is trying to manipulate you," he said finally. "I think contracts deserve review. It feels like you do not trust us." "Trust is not the same as documentation." His jaw tightened. "You always do this. You turn relationships into audits. Because audits reveal what people hope will not be noticed." 2 days later, Dana sent a formal request for disclosure. Income statements, brokerage accounts, outstanding credit, business interests, margin loans. Andrew read the letter standing in our kitchen. "This feels aggressive," he said. "It feels thorough." He placed the pages down harder than necessary. "You make more than you let on, do not you?" I held his gaze. "I make enough, and I am prepared to disclose it accurately." "Why did you let my family believe otherwise?" "Because they never asked directly." The tension between us shifted. For the first time, he looked uncertain rather than irritated. Over the next week, he provided partial disclosures, summaries without statements, rounded balances, vague descriptions of investments. Dana reviewed them and called me. "These are incomplete," she said. "We will request supporting documentation." That night, Andrew leaned against the doorway while I reviewed the files. "Are you satisfied?" he asked. "Not yet." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're acting like this is litigation." "It is a contract. Normal couples do not operate like this. Normal couples do not initiate prenuptial agreements at family dinners." He stared at me, frustration sharpening his features. "Maybe you are the only one preparing for failure." That sentence landed harder than I expected. "Failure is not what I prepare for," I said quietly. "I prepare for impact." 3 days later, he forwarded full statements. I started with the brokerage account dated November 2022, margin utilization during a declining commercial office market, leveraged exposure at precisely the wrong time. The position had been liquidated at a loss. Margin during contraction is not confidence, it's desperation. I moved to the credit card statements, balances above 40,000, payments barely above minimum thresholds. Then I checked dates. Several statement periods overlapped with the unauthorized charges I had flagged from Asheville. The $1,200 resort, the smaller transactions, the pattern that had begun forming in my spreadsheet. The numbers were not separate incidents. They were part of the same ecosystem. When Andrew came home that evening, I had the statements arranged in order. "Is this complete?" I asked. "Yes." "Are there any additional lines of credit?" "No." "Any personal loans?" "No." "You understand that if something is omitted and later discovered, enforceability could be compromised." His voice hardened. "You sound like you are planning our divorce before our wedding." "I am planning clarity before commitment." He paced once across the kitchen. "You do not need to understand every transaction to marry someone." "Actually, I do." He stopped moving. "Why?" "Because leverage changes behavior." He stared at me, as if trying to decide whether I was accusing him or defending myself. Later that night, I drafted my own disclosure. Salary $192,000, retirement accounts, brokerage portfolio, deferred compensation projections. Every line item precise. When I finished, I paused. Tomorrow, when this was exchanged, the narrative would shift. They would no longer see a modest professional marrying into their family structure. They would see parity, possibly advantage. Andrew stepped into the hallway, half awake. "You're still working on that?" "Yes." "Do you really believe my family is hiding something?" I thought about the margin position taken at the worst possible time, the $40,000 in revolving debt, the pressure to merge accounts before signatures were dry. Numbers tell the truth eventually. He watched me for a long moment. "Maybe you're overthinking again," he said softly. "Maybe, but overthinking has never cost me a house, a credit score, or a future." When he went back to bed, I remained at the table. Statement spread out, disclosure complete, spreadsheet open. If this agreement was meant to protect the Mitchell family, it was about to require them to expose everything they assumed I would never examine. Chapter 3: The Spreadsheet That Refused to Lie. It was not the $1,200 that frightened me. It was the pattern. The charge posted on a Thursday morning while I was reviewing quarterly risk projections at Blue Ridge Indemnity. Asheville Resort, $1,200. I had not been in Asheville. At first, I assumed error. I travel, I expense hotels, I move through cities for conferences. Mistakes happen. Then, I checked the date. That weekend, I had been in Raleigh at a compliance seminar with Dana. I still had the confirmation email from my hotel in my inbox. I had delivered a presentation on capital adequacy models on Saturday afternoon. I logged into my account and expanded the transaction history. $290 at a steakhouse in Asheville, $185 at a boutique, $312 at a spa. October, November, December, January, February. 29 transactions, $7,460, all under the fraud alert threshold. It was not the amount, it was the design. I did not call Andrew immediately. I did not slam my laptop shut. I opened Excel. Date, merchant, amount, location, timestamp. The spreadsheet steadied me. Patterns reveal themselves when you force them into columns. Most of the charges aligned with Andrew's travel schedule: property tours in Asheville, client meetings in Boone, weekend trips he described as quick overnights. Coincidence is random. This was structured. I texted him. "Were you in Asheville in February?" "Yeah, quick property visit. Why?" "Just checking something." "You sound serious." "Work stuff." When I got home that evening, he was at the kitchen island scrolling through his phone. "Everything okay?" he asked. I set my bag down slowly. "Did you use my card in Asheville?" He looked up, confusion crossing his face. "No, why would I?" I turned the laptop toward him. "That is why." He leaned forward, scanning the list. His eyes moved left to right. Date, merchant, amount. "That is weird," he said. "I do not remember using your card." 29 times? He blinked. "What do you mean 29? "Since October." He straightened. "That has to be a bank glitch." 29 glitches? He ran a hand through his hair. "I would not steal from you." "You did not ask." The word steal hung in the air like a crack in glass. He grabbed his wallet from the counter and flipped it open. "All my cards are here. I do not even have yours." Physical possession is not required for digital use. He stared at me. "You think I hacked you?" "I think someone used my number repeatedly." I canceled the card that night, requested a replacement. Then I called Dana the next morning. "If I suspect unauthorized use by my fiancé, what is the appropriate path?" "Document everything," she said calmly. "Do not escalate emotionally. If reimbursement becomes necessary, a civil demand letter is appropriate, but only when you are certain." 29 entries in a spreadsheet feel certain. "Intent matters legally," she added. "Pattern matters more." That word again, pattern. After we ended the call, I pulled up the financial disclosures Andrew had provided from Mitchell Interior Concepts. Revenue had declined for 3 consecutive years. Marketing expenses had increased. Cash reserves were thin. Then I searched public property records for the Ballantyne house. $265,000 home equity line of credit filed the previous year. The house with the white columns and manicured edges was leveraged. The family that spoke about protecting legacy had secured debt against their foundation. The prenuptial agreement was not about shielding wealth from me. It was about preventing scrutiny. That evening, I printed the statements and placed them neatly on the dining table. When Andrew walked in, he stopped. "What is this?" "Clarity." He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door. "You are serious about this?" "Yes." I slid the spreadsheet toward him. 29 transactions, $7,460, all during your travel windows. His jaw tightened. "You are making this sound criminal." "Is it not?" He laughed once without humor. "It's not like I emptied your account. It's not about the amount." "Then what is it about?" "Permission." Silence stretched between us. "I might have used it once for a reservation," he said finally. "Maybe it's saved automatically." 29 times? "I was going to replace it before you noticed." "Before I noticed?" He exhaled sharply. "My commissions have been inconsistent. The office market is collapsing. I didn't want to add stress." "So you removed it from yourself and assigned it to me. That is not fair." "Is it not?" He paced across the kitchen. "You track everything. It feels like I'm under surveillance." "No, you are under visibility. That is not normal. Using someone's financial access without consent is not normal." He stopped pacing. "You are blowing this out of proportion. $7,000 is proportionate. Trust erosion is exponential." He stared at the spreadsheet again. The columns were clean, unemotional, unforgiving. "You could have just talked to me," he said. "You could have just asked." The air felt thinner. "Do you have any other accounts I don't know about?" "No." "Any additional loans?" "No." "Any margin exposure still open?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than any confession. I leaned back slightly. "It's not the $1,200 that concerns me," I said quietly. "It's the fact that you assumed I wouldn't see it." He did not respond. The spreadsheet sat between us like evidence in a trial neither of us wanted to conduct. After a long pause, he said, "I'll transfer the money back tomorrow." That addresses the balance, not the boundary. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You do not forgive easily." "I forgive mistakes. I do not ignore patterns." He turned away, hands braced against the counter. "I didn't think you'd care about a few $100s at a time. You were not testing my tolerance. You were testing my awareness." The kitchen fell silent again. Outside, traffic moved steadily down the street. Inside, something more fragile shifted. For the first time since the engagement, I realized that the most dangerous part of this was not the debt, not the margin loss, not even the home equity line secured against the Ballantyne property. It was the quiet belief that my resources were accessible without my consent. And I understood with unsettling clarity that the next conversation would not remain confined to our kitchen table. Chapter 4. The night the disclosure turned against them. The night they wanted to celebrate transparency was the night their illusion collapsed. Carolyn Whitmore called it a birthday dinner. 69, elegant, symbolic. She said it would be intimate, immediate family, close friends, a perfect setting to finalize the prenuptial agreement in a spirit of unity. Unity under chandeliers. Her house in Brentland sat on a quiet street lined with manicured hedges and identical ambition. Valet attendants stood at the curb. Warm light poured from oversized windows. The kind of house designed to communicate permanence. Andrew stood beside me at the entrance, his hand resting lightly against my back. Since the confrontation in our kitchen, he had transferred the $7,460 back into my account. The money returned, the fracture did not. Dana Green arrived 5 minutes after we did. 58, controlled, navy dress, no wasted words. Carolyn's smile flickered when she saw her. "I did not realize we were turning this into a formal review," she said lightly. "I did not realize we were turning it into a signing ceremony," Dana replied. Dinner began smoothly. Andrew's father spoke about market rebounds. Claire refilled wine glasses with steady hands. Laughter rose and fell like carefully managed background noise. but beneath the surface, I felt the tension humming. Halfway through dessert, Carolyn placed her fork down and folded her napkin. "Before we end the evening," she said, "I believe it would be meaningful to formalize the agreement we discussed, just to show that we operate with clarity." Symbolic. She liked that word. Andrew shifted in his seat. I could feel the tightness in his posture. "Of course," I said evenly. "Before any signature, I would like the full schedule of liabilities attached and acknowledged, consistent with Tennessee law on voluntary and informed execution." The air shifted. Carolyn blinked once. "Naturally," she said. Andrew brought everything. Andrew reached for the leather folder beside him. His movements were deliberate, but I caught the hesitation in his fingers. Dana leaned forward slightly. "For clarity," she said calmly, "both parties must confirm complete disclosure of assets and liabilities at the time of signing. Incomplete disclosure can compromise enforceability." Carolyn's smile thinned. "We understand the law." Andrew began placing documents on the table: brokerage statements, credit summaries, a business overview for Whitmore Interior Group. I reviewed them slowly. No dramatics, just attention. There it was again. Margin exposure from 2 years prior during a declining commercial market, liquidated at a loss. $41,200 in revolving credit, a personal line of credit that had not been verbally disclosed. I lifted my eyes. "Andrew, would you like to explain the current balance before we attach this to an agreement described as protecting family assets?" Silence. Crystal glasses reflected chandelier light across the table. No one moved. Carolyn turned toward him. "What balance?" Andrew's jaw tightened. "It is temporary," he said. "Business fluctuation." $41,000 is not fluctuation, I replied calmly. It is leverage dependent on minimum payments. His father cleared his throat. "That is how development works. Debt is strategic." "Strategic is different from concealed," I said. Claire stared at her brother. "You did not tell Mom about that," she said softly. Andrew did not answer. Dana spoke without raising her voice. "Our concern is not the existence of debt. It is the completeness of disclosure at execution." Carolyn's fingers tightened around her water glass. "Why was I not aware of this number?" "I was handling it," Andrew said. "Handling it how?" Claire pressed. "By rolling balances." The crystal in Carolyn's hand trembled just enough to produce a faint sound against the rim. For the first time that evening, she did not look composed. "This is unnecessary," she said. "We are discussing private matters publicly." "You suggested signing publicly," I replied. I assumed that meant transparency extended to both sides. Andrew's gaze snapped toward me. "You wanted this to happen this way." "No, you wanted symbolism. I wanted accuracy." He stood slightly from his chair. "You could have addressed this privately. You could have disclosed it voluntarily." His father pushed his chair back an inch. "This feels like an ambush." "No," I said quietly. "It feels like math." I slid one additional page forward. "There are also 29 unauthorized transactions on my personal card over 5 months," I said evenly. $7,460. Repaid, yes. Undisclosed, also yes. Carolyn's head turned sharply. "Unauthorized." Andrew swallowed. "I was going to replace it." "You did," I said, "after discovery." The room held its breath. They thought the prenuptial agreement would protect them from me. Instead, it required them to confront their own exposure. Carolyn looked at Dana. "What are you suggesting?" "Given the new information presented, execution should be postponed until all disclosures are complete and voluntary." Postponed. The word echoed louder than any raised voice could have. Claire folded her hands together. "Andrew, is there anything else we do not know?" He did not respond immediately. That hesitation was louder than confession. Carolyn's posture shifted subtly, the controlled matriarch replaced by a woman recalculating. "This was not how tonight was supposed to go," she said quietly. "No," I agreed, "it was not." Andrew's voice sharpened. "You did not have to do this in front of everyone." I met his eyes steadily. "You asked for signatures in front of everyone." Silence again. The chandelier hummed softly overhead. Outside, cars passed without awareness of the recalibration happening inside that house. Visibility is irreversible. Carolyn closed the folder herself this time. "We will revisit this privately," she said. Dana nodded once. "We are available when you are ready to proceed with full disclosure." Guests began rising, polite murmurs, controlled exits. No one raised their voice, no one caused a scene, but the hierarchy in that room had shifted. As Andrew and I walked toward the door, he leaned closer to me. "You embarrassed me." I did not raise my voice. "That's worse." Outside, the night air felt cooler than before. As the valet handed us the keys, I realized something with complete certainty. There would be no wedding that followed this conversation. And for the first time, that realization did not feel like loss. Chapter 5. The Quiet Exit That Closed the Account. The decision felt procedural long before it felt emotional. 2 weeks after the dinner in Brentwood, I sat at the kitchen island with my laptop open and drafted the message that would end the engagement. "Andrew, after reviewing the disclosures and recent events, I am withdrawing from our engagement. I will not be signing the prenuptial agreement. Transparency is structural to me, not symbolic. I wish you stability moving forward." I read it once, then again. It was not dramatic. It was not cruel. It was clear. I pressed send. He found me in the hallway a few minutes later, phone in his hand. "You are serious," he said. "Yes. This is because of that dinner. This is because of everything that made the dinner necessary." He leaned against the wall and looked older than he had the month before. "You are ending this over money." "No, I am ending it over liability." "I paid you back." "You corrected a transaction. You did not correct the mindset behind it." He did not argue after that. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors, just a quiet recalibration neither of us could undo. In January 2025, I canceled the venue. The caterer kept a deposit. The florist refunded part of hers. Invitations that had not yet been mailed were torn in half and discarded. Dana Reynolds prepared the formal notice declining execution of the prenuptial agreement. Voluntary execution requires complete and accurate disclosure of assets and liabilities. Given evolving financial information, my client elects not to proceed. She also finalized the civil demand letter documenting the unauthorized transactions, dates, amounts, merchant codes. It referenced Tennessee statutes regarding misuse of financial instruments. Andrew did not contest it. The $7,460 had already been transferred back into my account. The letter created record, nothing more, nothing less. Within months, the external structure began shifting as well. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that the Brentwood house had quietly been refinanced again. A secondary investment property in Franklin was listed and sold to reduce the home equity line. Whitmore Interior Group consolidated locations and released staff. No public collapse, no scandal, but the house that once symbolized permanence had become collateral. The same family that spoke about legacy was restructuring leverage. In June 2025, something else shifted in a different direction. My managing director at Ridgeway Reinsurance called me into his office. "We are restructuring the catastrophe division," he said. "I would like you to step into Director of Strategic Modeling effective immediately." I felt the weight of the title before I felt excitement. "That is significant responsibility," I said. He nodded. "You do not ignore exposure. You quantify it and act. That discipline is leadership." The promotion came with a meaningful salary increase and long-term equity incentives. It was not revenge. It was alignment. The skill that ended an engagement strengthened my career. In August, I purchased a one-bedroom condo in Beacon Hill using only funds in my name. Brick exterior, tall windows, manageable mortgage, no shared liability. The first night I slept there, the quiet felt earned. Not triumphant, not bitter, stable. Andrew sent one final message in early September. "I hope you find what you were looking for." I stared at it before replying. I was not looking for more. I was protecting what I had already built. He never answered. When people ask what happened, I do not describe the chandelier or the silence at the table. I say something simpler. We defined transparency differently. Some call that pride. Some call it independence. I call it risk management. The most expensive mistake would not have been walking away. It would have been signing. I did not walk away from love. I walked away from liability. I did not lose a wedding. I regained control. There is a difference between partnership and absorption, between support and silent exposure, between symbolism and documentation. If someone frames your request for clarity as distrust, ask yourself who benefits from you asking fewer questions. If a contract is presented as ceremonial but resists complete disclosure, pause. Your signature binds more than emotion. It binds consequence. The only thing I almost signed away was my future. If you were sitting at that table with a pen in your hand and numbers that did not align with the story being told, would you have signed to preserve peace? Or would you have chosen visibility over comfort? Would you have called it mistrust or self-protection? Tell me what you would have done. I read every perspective, and if this story resonated with you, stay here. There are more conversations ahead about contracts, clarity, and the quiet exits that protect everything you have worked to build. If you value stories where strength is quiet but unshakable, subscribe.